The last purple light of Kepler 442 stretched across the crystal spires of Nethys, casting long shadows over a city that had once gleamed with the brilliance of 50,000 years of civilization. Now, those same spires stood cracked and dulled, their surfaces marred by the same plague that had reduced the Volari population from billions to mere thousands in a matter of months. Elder Zixathera stood on the balcony of the Grand Communication Tower, all six of her arms gripping the railing as she gazed out at what remained of her world. Her iridescent skin, once of vibrant blue, had faded to a sickly gray, not from the plague, but from the sorrow of watching her people die. Behind her, the sound of labored breathing reminded her that even this moment of contemplation was a luxury she could ill afford. "Elder," Cathmar called, his voice weak. The young advisor's body was already showing signs of the plague, the telltale crystalline patterns forming on his skin, glittering ominously in the failing light. "Hexara requests your presence in the transmission chamber. It's ready." Zixathera turned, her four primary eyes blinking in sequence, a gesture of acknowledgement and respect among the Volari. "Then we must not waste time," she said, her voice carrying the weight of countless funeral rites she had performed in recent weeks. "Lead on, Cathmar." They traversed the once bustling corridors of the tower, now empty, save for the occasional technician hurrying on some critical errand. The plague had begun without warning 6 cycles ago, turning flesh to crystalline dust that crumbled away like sand through an hourglass. No cure had been found. No treatment had slowed its progress. The only certainty was that within another 6 cycles, there would be no Volari left alive on Nethys. The transmission chamber hummed with energy when they arrived. Hexara, the communications chief, stood surrounded by a complex array of crystal-based technology, the last great achievement of Volari science. Her 8 fingers danced across the control surfaces, making final adjustments to the quantum SOS transmitter. "Elder," Hexara said, bowing slightly, though the movement caused her visible pain. The plague had already reached her limbs. "The transmitter is calibrated to send our message across all known frequency spectrums, including several theoretical ones. If anyone is listening out there, they will hear us." Zixathera nodded solemnly. "And the message itself?" "Programmed as you specified. Elder, simple, direct, translated into every mathematical and linguistic pattern we could conceive." "Then let us send it, before more of us are lost." Hexara stepped aside, allowing Zixathera to approach the central crystal. The Elder placed all 6 hands upon its faceted surface, feeling the warm pulse of energy beneath her palms. The crystal would amplify her voice, carrying it across the stars in a desperate plea. "This is Elder Zixathera of the Volari civilization on Nethys," she began, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hearts. "We are dying. A plague unlike any natural disease is consuming our people. We have days, perhaps hours remaining. Please, if anyone receives this message, please help. We have much knowledge to share, much beauty to preserve. Do not let us fade into silence." The crystal pulsed once, twice, then emitted a blinding flash of purple light that shot upward through the tower and into the darkening sky. The message was away, racing outward at speeds that defied conventional physics, thanks to the quantum entanglement properties of Volari crystal technology. Cathmar collapsed then, his form beginning to crystallize more rapidly. Zixathera knelt beside him, cradling his head with her lower arms, while her upper ones made the sacred gestures of passing. "Do you think anyone will come?" he whispered, his voice already taking on the brittle quality that preceded final dissolution. "I must believe so," Zixathera replied, though doubt clouded her hearts. "For if no one answers when a civilization calls for help, then what hope is there for any of us among the stars?" As Cathmar's body crumbled to glittering dust in her arms, Zixathera wondered if her people's final act would be nothing more than a cry into an uncaring void. Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Defiance stood on the bridge, staring at the holographic display with a mixture of disbelief and awe. The message had come through during the third watch, a quantum burst transmission unlike anything in the UES database. It had taken the ship's AI nearly 6 hours to decode it, and even now, parts remained untranslated. But the core of it was clear enough: a distress call, an SOS from an alien civilization. "Play it again," Morrison ordered, rubbing his temple. At 42, he was young for a captain of an exploration vessel, but his record spoke for itself. 5 first contacts, 3 new habitable worlds charted, and a reputation for level-headed decision-making under pressure. "Yes, Captain," replied Lisa Park, the communications officer. Her fingers moved across her console, and the message filled the bridge once more. The strange, melodic voice of an alien being, speaking words that had been translated into stilted English. "We are dying. A plague unlike any natural disease is consuming our people. We have days, perhaps hours remaining. Please, if anyone receives this message, please help." Morrison turned to his science officer, Lieutenant Commander Amy Carter. "Analysis?" Carter, a brilliant xenobiologist with a quiet confidence that belied her 30 years, gestured to her display. The signal originated from the Kepler 442 system, approximately 1/200 light-years from Earth. The technology used to send it is, well, it's beyond our current understanding. Captain, the message arrived instantaneously, despite the distance. "That's impossible," said Chief Engineer Ben Rodriguez, his bushy eyebrows furrowing. "Nothing travels faster than light." "And yet, here we are," Carter replied. "Whatever these Volari are, their technology is centuries ahead of ours." Morrison paced the bridge, weighing the implications. "How long would it take us to reach them?" "At maximum FTL, 3 weeks." Rodriguez answered. "But, Captain, I feel obligated to point out that Earth Command's protocols for first contact specifically prohibit intervention in alien conflicts or natural disasters. Observation only." Security Chief Dan Hayes, a former Marine with a perpetual scowl, grunted in agreement. "For all we know, this could be a trap. Lure us in with a distress call, then ambush us once we're in their system." Morrison stopped pacing and looked at each of his senior officers in turn. "I understand the protocols, but we're also talking about the potential extinction of an entire sentient species. If we do nothing and they die, what does that say about humanity's place among the stars?" Lisa Park spoke up, her voice soft but determined. "Captain, I've finished analyzing the emotional substrates of the message. There's no deception I can detect, only genuine fear and desperation." Morrison nodded, having already made his decision. "Set a course for the Kepler 442 system, maximum FTL, and send a message to Earth Command informing them of our intentions." He paused, then added, "I'll take full responsibility for this decision." As the bridge crew began preparations for the journey, Morrison retreated to his ready room. Earth Command would be furious. He was potentially risking humanity's first major interstellar diplomatic incident. But the alternative, ignoring a cry for help from a dying civilization, was unthinkable. He had just sat down at his desk when the ship's AI announced, "Captain, incoming message from Earth Command. Priority Alpha." Morrison sighed. "Put it through." Admiral Winter's stern face appeared on the screen, her expression thunderous. "Captain Morrison, your report has been received. You are hereby ordered to maintain position and await a diplomatic team. Under no circumstances are you to proceed to the Kepler system. With respect, Admiral, by the time a diplomatic team reaches our position, the Volari will be extinct." Morrison replied. "The Defiance is already on course." "Damn it, Morrison! This isn't your call to make. The potential ramifications will be on my head, yes. But I can't ignore this. Admiral, would you have us be the species that listens to a desperate plea for help and chooses to do nothing? Winter's expression softened slightly. Jake, I understand your position, but you're risking more than your career here. If this goes wrong, then I'll face the consequences, Morrison said firmly. But if it goes right, we might save an entire civilization. That's worth any risk. After a long pause, Winters sighed. You always were the idealistic one. Very well. Proceed to Kepler 442, but maintain constant communication. And Morrison, be careful. Always am, Admiral. As the connection closed, Morrison found himself hoping that his confidence wasn't misplaced. They were heading into completely unknown territory, responding to a call from a species humanity had never encountered, to fight a plague they knew nothing about. Yet, despite all that, for the first time in his career, Morrison felt absolutely certain he was making the right choice. 3 weeks of FTL travel passed in a blur of preparation. The science team worked around the clock to develop theoretical treatments for a disease they had no samples of, based solely on the fragmentary descriptions in the Volari transmission. Engineering reinforced the ship's shields against unknown threats. Security ran combat drills, while communications attempted to establish further contact with Nethys, to no avail. As they dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, a hush fell over the bridge. The main view screen showed a beautiful star system, 7 planets orbiting a K-type star that bathed everything in a reddish-orange glow. According to their data, Nethys was the second planet. Sensors at maximum range, Morrison ordered. Let's see what we're dealing with. Captain, Hayes called out, his voice tense. I'm detecting multiple ships in orbit around the second planet. Large vessels, warship class, based on their configuration. Morrison frowned. How many? 30, sir. And they're not Volari. At least not according to the design specifications we extracted from the SOS message. Put them on screen. The view screen shifted to show a fleet of angular, predatory-looking vessels. Their hulls a matte black that absorbed light rather than reflected it. They were arranged in an attack formation, weapons clearly targeting the planet below. Life signs on Nethys? Morrison asked. Carter looked up from her station, face pale. Faint, Captain. Population centers are showing massive decline in life readings, and there's some kind of energy weapon being deployed from those ships. It's not targeting structures. It's targeting life forms directly. The realization hit Morrison like a physical blow. This isn't a natural plague. It's genocide. Sir, Park called out. I'm intercepting communications between the ships. Translating now. A harsh, guttural language filled the bridge, quickly replaced by the AI's translation. Proceed with final sterilization protocol. The Corfac Imperium claims this world for resource extraction. No Volari witnesses are to remain. Morrison's jaw tightened. Battle stations, shields up, weapons online. Hayes turned in shock. Captain, we're 1 exploration vessel against 30 warships. I am aware of the odds, Chief Hayes. Morrison replied, his voice steady. But I didn't come 1,200 light-years to watch a civilization be exterminated. Lieutenant Commander Carter, I need options for counteracting that energy weapon. Commander Rodriguez, divert all non-essential power to shields and engines. Lieutenant Park, broadcast on all frequencies. Let's see if we can reason with these Corfac. As the crew scrambled to obey, Morrison felt a strange calm settle over him. The Defiance was outgunned and outnumbered, but they had the element of surprise, and more importantly, they had moral clarity. No matter what Earth Command might say later, no human with a conscience could witness genocide and do nothing. Broadcast ready, sir, Park announced. Morrison straightened his uniform and faced the view screen. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Defiance. We have received a distress call from the planet Nethys and are here to render humanitarian aid. Cease your attack immediately and withdraw from this system. For several tense seconds, there was no response. Then the view screen flickered, revealing a reptilian humanoid with scale-like skin and vertical pupils. Its mouth, filled with needle-like teeth, curved into what might have been a smile. "Human vessel," the alien said, its translated voice dripping with contempt. "This matter does not concern your species. The Volari are a plague upon this region of space. Their technology threatens the stability of the Corfac Imperium. Depart now, or share their fate." Morrison met the alien's gaze unflinchingly. "We cannot do that. The deliberate extinction of a sentient species violates every principle we hold. One final warning. Withdraw your forces." The Corfac commander hissed, revealing more teeth. "Your arrogance is remarkable for such an insignificant species. Very well. You may serve as an object lesson for any other would-be interferers." The transmission cut off abruptly. On the tactical display, 5 Corfac warships broke formation and accelerated toward the Defiance. "Evasive maneuvers," Morrison ordered. "Target their weapon systems only. I want to disable, not destroy." As the Defiance banked sharply, narrowly avoiding the first salvo of energy weapons, Morrison knew they had crossed a line from which there was no return. Humanity had just entered its first interstellar conflict, not for territory or resources, but in defense of a civilization they had never even met. The Defiance shuddered as another energy blast glanced off its shields. 4 hours into the battle, and they were still alive, a testament to Rodriguez's engineering genius and Hayes' tactical acumen. By using the system's asteroid field as cover and executing a series of unpredictable maneuvers, they had managed to disable 3 Corfac vessels while sustaining only moderate damage. But it wouldn't be enough. The remaining Corfac ships had adapted to their tactics, and the Defiance's shields were failing. "Shield capacity at 27%, Rodriguez reported, wiping sweat from his brow. "One more direct hit, and we're done for." In the science lab, Amy Carter worked feverishly, analyzing the energy signature of the Corfac weapon. She had discovered something crucial. The plague was actually an energy field that disrupted the crystalline molecular structure unique to Volari physiology, causing it to destabilize and crumble. "Captain," she called over the comm, "I think I've found a way to neutralize the weapon. It operates on a specific frequency that targets the Volari crystalline biology. If we can generate an inverse wave pattern and deploy it planet-wide, we could stop the plague's progression." Morrison's voice came back, strained but determined. "Can you make it happen, Carter?" "I need to get to the surface. The ship's systems aren't powerful enough to generate a planetary-scale field." A moment of silence. Then, "Understood. Prepare for a shuttle mission. Hayes will accompany you." 10 minutes later, Carter and Hayes were aboard the Defiance's shuttle, armed with a prototype countermeasure and a prayer. As they launched from the bay, the Defiance executed a daring attack run, drawing the Corfac fire away from the small craft. "Shuttle away," Park reported. "Estimated time to atmospheric entry, 3 minutes. Morrison nodded grimly. "Rodriguez, what's the status on that shield modification?" The engineer looked up from his improvised workstation, where he'd been frantically reconfiguring the shield generators. "It's ready, Captain, but I can't guarantee it'll hold. I've never tried to modulate shields to this frequency before." "It's our best shot," Morrison replied. "All hands, prepare for direct engagement. We need to keep those ships busy until Carter and Hayes complete their mission." The Defiance emerged from the asteroid field, weapons blazing. The new shield configuration glowed with an eerie purple light as it absorbed and partially deflected the Corfac energy weapons. It wouldn't last long, but it didn't need to, just long enough for a miracle. On the surface of Nethys, the shuttle landed amidst the crystalline ruins of what had once been a magnificent city. Carter and Hayes emerged, suited in protective gear, into a landscape of death and beauty. The bodies of fallen Volari glittered like diamond dust in the purple twilight, while those still alive huddled in sealed chambers, their once proud forms now frail and deteriorating. "This way," Carter said, consulting her scanner. "There's a power node 200 meters east that should be compatible with our device." As they made their way through the ruins, Hayes maintained a vigilant watch, pulse rifle at the ready. "If this works," he said quietly, "what happens to the Corfax ships still in orbit?" "The countermeasure only affects the specific energy frequency they're using as a weapon," Carter explained. "It won't harm their ships, but it will render their genocide device useless." They reached the power node, a towering crystal spire that still hummed with energy, despite the devastation around it. Carter immediately set to work, connecting their device to the Volari technology with improvised adapters. "I need 10 minutes, she told Hayes, her fingers flying over the interface. "I'll buy you 15, he replied, taking up a defensive position as movement caught his eye at the edge of the ruins. In orbit, the Defiance executed a desperate gambit, flying directly between two Corfax warships, causing them to hit each other with their weapons. As Rodriguez had theorized, the energy blast from one ship disrupted the systems of the other, temporarily disabling both. "Captain," Park called out, "I'm detecting a Corfax boarding party. They've breached Deck C." Morrison drew his sidearm. "Security teams to Deck C. Rodriguez, hold the engine room at all costs. Park, you have the bridge." As Morrison joined the defense against the boarding party, reptilian warriors in sleek battle armor wielding energy staves, Carter's voice came through on the comm. "Device activated. Countermeasure deploying now." A wave of violet energy pulsed outward from the crystal spire, expanding rapidly to encompass the entire planet. As it passed through the remaining Volari, their deterioration halted immediately. The crystalline patterns on their skin stabilized, then slowly began to recede. In orbit, the energy wave continued outward, washing over the Corfax ships. Their weapons suddenly went dark, power systems fluctuating as the countermeasure disrupted their technology. "It worked!" Carter's jubilant voice echoed through the comm. "The plague weapon has been neutralized!" Taking advantage of the Corfax's momentary confusion, Morrison ordered a daring counterattack. The Defiance, despite its damage, managed to disable the propulsion systems of the Corfax flagship within moments. Earth's first boarding party in interstellar space was making its way onto the alien vessel. Morrison led the team himself, fighting through the ship's corridors until they reached the bridge. There, in a tense standoff, the Corfax commander surrendered rather than see his entire crew killed. Using the captured flagship's communication systems, Morrison broadcast an ultimatum to the remaining Corfax vessels: withdraw immediately or face destruction by their own flagship's weapons, now under human control. The Corfax fleet, faced with a situation they had never anticipated, chose retreat. As the last warship disappeared into FTL, a cheer went up throughout the Defiance. But the victory celebration was short-lived. The damage to Nethys was catastrophic. Millions of Volari had died before the countermeasure could be deployed. Those who remained would need extensive assistance to rebuild. On the surface, Elder Zixathera, one of the few Volari leaders to survive, greeted Carter and Hayes with a formal, six-armed gesture of profound gratitude. "You came," she said simply, her voice breaking with emotion. "When we sent our call into the darkness, you answered." "We couldn't do otherwise," Carter replied, removing her helmet to meet the Elder's four eyes directly. No civilization should die alone and unanswered. As the first stages of relief efforts began, a message was sent back to Earth, not just reporting their unexpected conflict, but broadcasting something far more significant. Humanity had made its choice. When faced with the suffering of others, they had chosen to help, regardless of the cost. And unknown to them at the time, that message, that choice, was being observed by civilizations throughout this region of the galaxy. The silence of the stars was about to be broken. 6 months after the Battle of Nethys, the orbital station designated Netha Station had become a hub of unprecedented interstellar activity. Built using a combination of human and Volari technology, the station served as both a recovery center for the plague survivors and as humanity's first permanent diplomatic outpost in deep space. Ambassador Helen Cruz stood in the observation dome, watching shuttles come and go between the station and the planet below. At 58, Cruz had spent decades in Earth's diplomatic corps, but nothing in her experience had prepared her for the challenges of interstellar diplomacy in the wake of the Defiance's intervention. "Quite a view, isn't it?" said a voice behind her. Cruz turned to see Commander Rachel Foster, the intelligence officer assigned to Netha Station. Foster was younger, early 30s, with the sharp, analytical mind that had made her invaluable in deciphering the complex political landscape they now found themselves navigating. "It never gets old," Cruz agreed. "To think, 6 months ago we didn't even know the Volari existed. Now we're helping them rebuild their civilization." Foster nodded, but her expression remained serious. "That's actually why I've come to find you. I've discovered something concerning in the data we've been gathering." Cruz recognized that tone. "Your office, then." Once inside the secure confines of Foster's intelligence center, the younger woman activated a holographic display showing dozens of star systems connected by glowing lines. "We've been collating information from multiple sources, Volari historical records, data captured from the Corfax ships, and transmissions we've intercepted since establishing the station," Foster explained. "A pattern has emerged, and it's troubling." The display zoomed in on a region spanning hundreds of light years. "This area contains approximately 300 inhabited star systems, with dozens of sentient species at various technological levels. But they're all governed, or more accurately, controlled, by something called the Hegemony Council." "I've heard mentions of this council in my discussions with Zixathara," Cruz said. "Some kind of interstellar governing body?" "More like an interstellar protection racket," Foster replied grimly. "The council is comprised of representatives from 9 dominant species, including the Corfax. They maintain control through a combination of technological superiority and strategic resource monopolies." The display shifted again, showing planets with obvious signs of devastation. "What happened at Nethys wasn't an isolated incident, Ambassador. The Council routinely eliminates civilizations they deem threatening to their power structure, whether through direct military action or engineered disasters that appear natural." Cruz stared at the images, her diplomatic mask slipping to reveal horror. "You're describing systematic genocide on an interstellar scale." "Precisely. And there's more." Foster brought up new data, trade routes, resource extraction operations, and what appeared to be labor camps. Slavery, engineered famines, forced relocation of entire populations, all tools used by the Council to maintain control. "Why didn't the Volari tell us this?" Cruz demanded. "Because they didn't know the full extent of it," Foster explained. "Each victim's civilization is kept isolated, made to believe they're alone in their suffering. The Council controls all interstellar communications, censorships travel, and rewrites history to suit their narrative." Cruz sank into a chair, the implications overwhelming. "So when the Defiance responded to the Volari distress call, we didn't just save one civilization," Foster confirmed. "We disrupted the entire paradigm. For the first time in centuries, someone answered a cry for help, and won." Their discussion was interrupted by an urgent communication. "Ambassador Cruz," came the voice of Captain Steve Murphy, commander of the UES Guardian, which had arrived to reinforce the human presence at Nethys. "We've received a distress call from the Macaulay system. Corfax vessels are conducting reprisal attacks against slave populations that attempted to revolt after news of Nethys reached them." Cruz and Foster exchanged looks. This was the moment of truth, the point where humanity's intervention at Nethys would either be revealed as a one-time anomaly or the beginning of a new policy. "How far is the Macaulay system?" Cruz asked. 3 days at maximum FTL, Murphy replied. "But Ambassador, I should note that I've received no authorization from Earth Command to engage in another conflict." Cruz took a deep breath. "Captain Murphy, I'm invoking Section 7 of the Emergency Diplomatic Powers Act. As the ranking Earth representative in this sector, I'm authorizing you to respond to the Macaulay distress call with all necessary force to prevent further loss of life." There was a pause before Murphy responded. "Understood, Ambassador. The Guardian will depart immediately. Murphy out." As the communication ended, Foster gave Cruz a questioning look. "Section 7 doesn't actually grant you that authority." A small smile played at the corner of Cruz's mouth. "Captain Murphy doesn't know that. And by the time Earth Command countermands my order, the Guardian will have already acted. Sometimes, Commander Foster, diplomacy requires creating facts on the ground." Over the next 2 weeks, events unfolded at a breathtaking pace. The Guardian, along with 2 smaller human vessels that had recently arrived at Nethys, successfully liberated the Macaulay system. The victory, while narrow, proved that Nethys had not been a fluke. Humanity's intervention could work as a repeatable strategy. Meanwhile, Foster continued her intelligence gathering with renewed urgency. Each new piece of data confirmed her worst fears, while providing crucial tactical information about Council operations throughout the sector. The turning point came when a delegation of Zarathi, one of the 9 Council species, arrived at Nethys Station with an ultimatum. Humans must cease all military operations outside their home system or face annihilation by the combined forces of the Hegemony Council. Cruz received the delegation in the station's Grand Conference Chamber, with Foster at her side and a direct link to Earth Command monitoring the proceedings. The lead Zarathi diplomat, a tall avian being named Koreth, delivered the Council's message with cold precision. "Your species' interference in matters beyond your understanding cannot be tolerated," Koreth stated. "The Council maintains order across 300 star systems. The death of a few failing civilizations is a small price for the stability of the galactic region." Cruz listened without interruption, then replied with equal coldness. "Thank you for your candor, Envoy Koreth. It saves us the trouble of having to prove the Council's genocidal policies." She nodded to Foster, who activated a holographic display showing evidence of Council atrocities compiled over the past months. "We understand perfectly what the Council represents," Cruz continued. "A system where the powerful prey on the weak, where entire civilizations are sacrificed for resources, and where cries for help go deliberately unanswered. Humanity rejects this system utterly and completely." Koreth's feathers ruffled in agitation. "You have made an enemy of the 9 most powerful species in this sector of the galaxy. Your homeworld will burn for this defiance." Cruz stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "Perhaps, but we would rather die standing against genocide than live complicit in it. Convey to your Council that Earth and its allies reject your ultimatum. We will continue to answer calls for help, wherever they come from." As the Zarathi delegation departed, the secure channel to Earth Command activated. Admiral Winter's face appeared, her expression a mixture of pride and exasperation. "That was quite a speech, Ambassador," she said. "But the Joint Chiefs are concerned about the commitment you've just made on humanity's behalf. We have 7 ships in your sector. The Council reportedly has thousands. The numbers aren't as lopsided as they appear." "Admiral," Foster interjected, bringing up new data. "We've been contacted by representatives from 23 subjugated species since the Macaulay liberation. They're offering ships, resources, intelligence, everything they can muster to support a resistance against the Council." "A resistance led by humanity," Winters noted skeptically. "Someone has to stand up first," Cruz replied simply. "It happens to be us." After a long moment, Winters nodded. The President has authorized Operation Protector. All available ships are being diverted to your sector. Ambassador. But it will take months for the fleet to assemble. Until then, you're on your own. Not on our own, Admiral, Cruz corrected. With allies. As the communication ended, Foster looked at Cruz with newfound respect. You knew Earth would back your play. I hoped, Cruz admitted. Humanity has its flaws, but once we've seen an injustice this clear, we can't turn away. Now, Commander, let's get to work. We have a resistance to organize before the Council decides to make an example of us. Supreme Commander Zathalar of the Hegemony Council forces stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Inevitable Dominion, as it dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Sol system, humanity's home. At over 7 feet tall, with gray skin and eyes adapted for the methane atmosphere of his homeworld. He cut an imposing figure, even among his own species. Status report, he demanded of his subordinates. The Human Defense Force is assembled at the 4th planet. Commander, replied his tactical officer. 17 vessels of various classes. Additionally, we are detecting unexpected ship signatures. Zathalar frowned. Explain. Vessels of Valari design, Anne Macaulay, and 23 other species, all formally under Council control. They appear to have formed a combined fleet with the humans. This was unexpected. The intelligence briefings had indicated that humanity had made contact with a few subjugated species, but nothing suggested they had managed to assemble an allied force of this magnitude in the few months since their interference began. It changes nothing, Zathalar declared. Our armada consists of 162 capital ships, plus support vessels. They cannot hope to stand against us. Open a channel to their command vessel. The view screen activated to show a human male in a formal uniform, adorned with insignia that Zathalar's cultural database identified as indicating high military rank. This is Admiral Tony Blake of the Terran Protective Alliance, the human said, his expression resolute. You have entered sovereign solar space without authorization. State your purpose. Zathalar allowed himself a cold smile. Terran Protective Alliance? An ambitious name for such a paltry force. I am Supreme Commander Zathalar of the Hegemony Council. I come to deliver justice for your species' interference in Council affairs. If by interference you mean preventing genocide and liberating slaves, then we acknowledge the charge, Blake replied calmly. But before you commit your forces to battle, I suggest you review this transmission. The screen split to show a second feed, a broadcast being transmitted not just to Zathalar's fleet, but to every inhabited system in the sector. On it, a human female in diplomatic attire stood beside representatives of multiple species. This is Ambassador Helen Cruz of Earth, she began. For centuries, the Hegemony Council has maintained its power through systematic oppression, genocide, and the deliberate isolation of victim civilizations. Today, that ends. The broadcast continued with a devastating presentation of evidence, records seized from Corfax ships at Nethys, testimony from survivors of Council atrocities, and detailed intelligence on Council operations throughout the sector. Most damning were the internal Council communications regarding population control policies and the strategic use of engineered disasters to eliminate problem civilizations. As the broadcast continued, Zathalar's communication officer reported in growing alarm. Commander, we're detecting widespread communications across the sector. Subjugated worlds they're in open revolt. Council loyalist forces are reporting simultaneous attacks on their positions across 73 systems. Zathalar's composure finally cracked. How is this possible? The communication controls have been compromised, Blake finished for him, returning to the screen. For the past 3 months, we've been using modified Valari quantum communication technology to bypass your censorship systems. Every atrocity, every suppressed cry for help, every act of Council brutality has been broadcast to every world under your control. You've done nothing but ensure your own destruction, Thalar snarled. Our forces still vastly outnumber yours. Perhaps, Blake acknowledged. But we're not fighting to conquer you, Commander Thalar. We're fighting for something far more powerful. The right of every sentient species to exist free from the threat of extinction. That is a cause people will die for. Thalar cut the transmission with a gesture of disgust. All ships, attack formation. Target the human homeworld directly. Let's see how principled they remain when their planet burns. The Council Armada advanced, their weapons powering up for a devastating first strike. But as they closed the distance, the Allied fleet executed a maneuver that confused Thalar's tactical officers. Instead of forming a defensive screen around Earth, they dispersed into smaller groups, each targeting specific vessels in the Council fleet. What is this strategy? Thalar demanded. His question was answered when the first Allied attack struck. A combined group of human, Volari, and Macaulay ships hit a Council destroyer with a coordinated barrage, not of conventional weapons, but of modified versions of the same energy that had neutralized the Corfac plague weapon at Nethys. The Council ship's systems went dark, its weapons and engines disabled without destroying the vessel or harming its crew. They're using non-lethal weapons, Thalar realized with shock. Target their lead vessels! Full power to forward batteries! But the Allied fleet's strategy was working. Ship after Council ship fell silent, disabled rather than destroyed. The modified crystal technology, developed by a collaboration of human and Volari scientists, disrupted Council systems without causing catastrophic damage. For 3 hours, the battle raged across the Sol system. The Council's superior numbers were offset by the Allies' unconventional tactics and weapons. Even more devastating was the psychological impact. Council crews, expecting to face an enemy fighting for survival, were instead confronted by an opponent, deliberately choosing not to kill them when given the opportunity. On the inevitable Dominion, Thalar watched in mounting horror as his armada was systematically neutralized. The final blow came when 3 Volari ships, escorting a human vessel, broke through his flagship's defenses and hit it with a concentrated burst of the disabling energy. As his ship's systems failed around him, Thalar received one final communication from Admiral Blake. Supreme Commander, your fleet has been neutralized. Your crew will not be harmed. We offer you the choice: surrender and face justice for the Council's crimes, or retreat to Council space with the knowledge that your era of unopposed dominance has ended. Thalar, the architect of a dozen genocides and countless subjugations, found himself facing something he had never anticipated: mercy from an enemy with every reason to destroy him. You are making a mistake, he said at last. Without the Council's control, this sector will descend into chaos. Perhaps, Blake replied, but it will be the chaos of freedom, not the order of tyranny. Your choice, Commander. In the end, Thalar surrendered. The symbolic impact of the Council's supreme military commander being brought before an interspecies tribunal was too valuable to the newborn alliance. As he was escorted from his bridge by a mixed team of human and Volari security officers, Thalar found himself wondering how a species so new to interstellar travel had managed to upend centuries of established order in a matter of months. The answer, though he couldn't see it yet, was simple. When the Volari had sent their desperate message into the void, humanity had done what no Council species would do. They had answered. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, representatives from 32 formerly subjugated species gathered on Nethys Station for a historic occasion. The Grand Chamber, once a simple meeting room, had been transformed with symbols and architectural elements from all participating civilizations, a physical representation of the unprecedented cooperation that had brought them to this moment. Elder Zixathara, now fully recovered from the plague and serving as the Volari's chief diplomat, stood beside Ambassador Cruz as they prepared for the ceremony. Her once gray skin had regained its vibrant blue luster, and all 6 of her arms were adorned with the ceremonial markings of her position. "I still find it difficult to believe," Zixathara confessed quietly. "When we sent our message, we expected only death. And instead, you found a galaxy ready for change," Cruz replied. "All it needed was a catalyst." The chamber hushed as Admiral Blake entered, accompanied by Captain Morrison of the Defiance and Captain Murphy of the Guardian. Behind them came the representatives of each allied species, some walking, some floating, some moving by means humans had no words to describe, yet all united by a common purpose. "Representatives of the free worlds," Blake began, his voice carrying throughout the chamber and being transmitted across 32 star systems simultaneously. "We gather today to formalize what began with a single act of compassion, a choice to answer a call for help when all others remain silent." On the central platform, a document materialized as a holographic display, the Terran Protective Alliance Charter. Not a treaty of conquest or domination, but a mutual defense pact with a simple core principle. An attack on one signatory civilization would be treated as an attack on all. "The Hegemony Council maintained power through isolation," Blake continued. "They ensured that no cry for help could be heard by those who might answer it. Today, we end that silence forever." One by one, the representatives approached the charter, each adding their signature or equivalent mark of commitment. Morrison, watching from the side, felt a profound sense of vindication. That initial decision to disobey orders and respond to the Volari distress call had cascaded into something far greater than he could have imagined. When all signatures were complete, Cruz activated the final protocol, a modification of the same quantum transmission technology that had carried the Volari SOS. But this message was different. It contained no plea for help, no desperate last words of a dying civilization. Instead, it carried a promise. To all sentient beings within range of this message, you are not alone. If you call, we will come. The silence of the stars ends today. As the message raced outward at impossible speeds, crossing light years in instants, Cruz turned to Morrison. "You know, Captain, when historians write about this moment, they'll say it began with your decision to answer one distress call." Morrison shook his head. "It began with Elder Zixathera's courage to send that call, even when there was no reason to believe anyone would hear it." "Perhaps," Cruz conceded, "but the truly remarkable thing is what happened after. How quickly other species joined once they realized cooperation was possible. It suggests the Council's control was always more fragile than it appeared." "Tyranny usually is," Blake commented, joining their conversation. "It requires constant effort to maintain, while freedom, once established, sustains itself." As the formal ceremony concluded, the gathering transitioned to a celebration. Species that had been mortal enemies under Council rule now found themselves cautiously exploring cultural exchanges. Languages were shared, music compared, sciences integrated. The first tentative steps toward a genuine interstellar community were being taken. In a quiet moment during the festivities, Dr. Amy Carter found herself standing with Elder Zixathera at one of the station's observation windows, looking out at the stars. "I've been meaning to ask you something," Carter said. "When you sent your message, your SOS, why did you phrase it as you did? A simple technical request for medical assistance might have been more effective." Zixathara's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, the Volari equivalent of a thoughtful pause. "In our final hours, efficiency seemed less important than connection. We didn't just need technical help. We needed someone to care that we were dying. The crystal technology could be rebuilt. Our art, our music, our philosophy. These were what we truly feared losing forever." Carter nodded, understanding. "And that's why humanity responded. Not just because we could help, but because we recognized something of ourselves in your call. The fear of being forgotten, And now, neither of us will be, Zixathara said, gesturing toward the celebration with three of her arms, while the other three made a traditional Valari symbol of hope. What happens next, I wonder? As if in answer, Captain Morrison approached them, holding a communication device. We've just received word from the Elthari system. They've overthrown their council overseers and are requesting alliance assistance to stabilize their government. Another call answered, Zixathara observed. The first of many. I suspect, Morrison replied. The silence is well and truly broken now. In the years that followed, the alliance would face countless challenges. Council remnants fighting rearguard actions, internal disputes between formerly antagonistic species, the complex process of dismantling centuries of oppressive infrastructure. There would be setbacks and losses, diplomatic failures and military missteps. But through it all, one principle remained constant. When a civilization called for help, they would receive an answer. The stars, once silent witnesses to countless atrocities, now carried messages of hope and solidarity across the void. And at the heart of this transformation was the simple choice made by one ship's captain, who decided that no cry for help should go unanswered, no matter how distant the voice or how great the risk. As Elder Zixathara had observed in those first desperate hours on Nethys, if no one answers when a civilization calls for help, what hope is there for any of us among the stars? Humanity's answer to that question had changed the galaxy forever.